Clayton Morrow didn't even bother to sit down before firing me. He stood at the head of the boardroom table, sleeves rolled up like he was about to fix a leaking pipe instead of ending a 15-year career. "Let's be honest. Cassidy," he said, tapping the slide behind him with a pen. "Your role has become unnecessary. We're moving forward without you. 10 minutes. That was the entire meeting. 10 minutes to erase 15 years. If you're still following, please leave your lucky number in the comments. I really want to know. I also want to know where you heard this from. And sometimes just a small action from you, like subscribing to the channel Goldfish Revenge, is a way to share good values. My name is Cassidy Nolan. For the past decade and a half, I built Northridge Global's Strategic Partnerships division from a failing experiment into the company's most profitable unit, 38% of the company's total revenue, more than $620 million in long-term contracts with logistics firms, healthcare systems, and financial networks. Apparently, that was the problem. Clayton Morrow had been CEO for exactly 7 weeks. Harvard MBA, spreadsheet evangelist, the kind of executive who believed every relationship could be replaced with a dashboard and a scalable client management system. He didn't ask about the clients. He didn't ask about the contracts. He simply pushed a termination agreement across the table. Standard restructuring. He said, "I signed it. No argument, no speech, no scene, just silence." Security escorted me back to my office. I packed a cardboard box, a client award from North Star Logistics, a photo from our first division retreat, and 15 years of work reduced to a few personal items. Outside, the glass tower reflected the afternoon sun like nothing had happened. I sat in my car, finally breathing. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Clayton. "Cassidy? Quick question. Do you still have the renewal contacts for our top 5 accounts?" I stared at the screen. Then I smiled. Because at that exact moment, another notification appeared. An internal email accidentally forwarded to my personal address. Subject line, Phase 1. Nolan Division Elimination Plan. Apparently, Clayton had planned my termination weeks ago. What he hadn't planned for was everything that was about to happen next. The next part of this story blends a touch of fiction with the help of artificial intelligence, created to explore real lessons and emotional truths. Thank you for spending this moment listening. And if today isn't the right time to continue, that's perfectly okay. Take a breath, step away, and take care of yourself first. The drive home gave me too much time to think. 15 years is a long time to build something people later pretend appeared by itself. When I first took over the Strategic Partnerships division, it was bleeding $8.7 million a year, 7 employees. Half the clients were already preparing exit clauses. The board had given the department 1 year before shutting it down entirely. So I rebuilt it, not with flashy presentations or executive buzzwords, with phone calls, midnight flights, and showing up when clients had problems nobody else wanted to solve. 1 contract turned into 3. Regional accounts became national partnerships. Eventually, our client list included several Fortune 500 companies. Revenue climbed from $9 million a year to $220 million. More importantly, 96% of our clients stayed. That kind of loyalty never shows up neatly in a spreadsheet. Clayton Morrow, however, loved spreadsheets. In his second executive strategy meeting, he leaned back in his chair and said something that stuck with me. "Any CRM system can replace relationship managers." The room went quiet. I remember thinking he had just announced he didn't understand our business at all. 2 weeks before he fired me, Clayton sent a short request. "Send me a full client dependency report." I did. Contracts, revenue, renewal timelines, all perfectly organized. What I didn't include was the one asset his spreadsheets couldn't measure: trust. Later that evening, a message arrived from a colleague still inside the company. Attached was a slide deck from Clayton's restructuring plan. Slide 11 stopped me cold. Phase 2. Replace Nolan's team with automation. The next morning, the silence after my termination didn't last long. At 9:30 a.m., My phone rang while I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee I hadn't touched. The name on the screen made me pause. Daniel Reeves, CEO of North Star Logistics. North Star was one of our largest contracts, $80 million over 5 years. I answered. Cassidy, he said without greeting. Please tell me you're still handling our account. There was no panic in my voice when I replied. I'm no longer with the company. The silence on the other end stretched longer than the question had. Finally, he exhaled. Who replaced you, I don't know. I said honestly. Another pause. Well, Daniel said slowly, that's concerning. When the call ended, I stared at my phone for a moment. Then it rang again, and again. By the end of the day, 6 major clients had called: North Star, Delta Freight, Meridian Healthcare Supply, Vector Industrial Systems, Brightcore Finance, one after another. The conversations followed the same pattern: shock, concern, then the same question. Who's managing our account now? My answer never changed. I haven't been told. Because, as far as I knew, Clayton Morrow hadn't assigned anyone. That realization brought something unexpected. Calm. For 15 years. I had been the bridge between those companies and ours. Clayton believed relationships could be replaced with software and dashboards. Apparently, he hadn't installed those yet. By 10:40 p.m., I opened my laptop and wrote down the numbers. 6 clients, $410 million in combined active contracts, all of them suddenly uncertain about the future. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a client. It was Clayton Morrow. A text message, Cassidy. Quick question, do you still have the updated renewal schedule? I didn't reply. 2 minutes later, another message arrived. Then another. By midnight, there were 7 messages sitting on my screen. The final one read, we need to talk about a transition arrangement. I leaned back in my chair and looked at the list of client names still open on my laptop. For the first time since the firing, the situation was becoming perfectly clear. Clayton hadn't just removed me from the company. He had removed the one person holding those relationships together. And now he was beginning to realize it. By the second morning after my termination, the calm I felt the night before had settled into something sharper. Not anger, not revenge, just quiet clarity. The first sign that things inside Northridge were unraveling came through an email forwarded by an old colleague in finance. 3 major clients had sent formal notices overnight. Each message used nearly identical language: concern regarding leadership stability, corporate phrasing, polite and careful. But the meaning was obvious. Those companies were questioning whether Northridge could still manage their contracts without the person who had built them. Later that afternoon, my former CFO sent me another update. During the executive briefing, finance had flagged something serious. $140 million in contracts scheduled for renewal within the next 90 days were now considered at risk. Apparently, that number had made the room very quiet. A few minutes after hearing that, my phone rang. Clayton Morrow, I answered. Cassidy, he began, his voice noticeably less confident than during the boardroom meeting. Maybe we moved too fast. I leaned back in my chair. I thought systems were scalable, I said calmly. There was a long pause on the line. When Clayton spoke again, his tone had shifted. Look, we may have underestimated the transition complexity. The board is asking questions. Of course they were. Then he made his offer. We'd like to discuss a consulting arrangement, temporary support while we stabilize the client relationships. He cleared his throat. $40,000 a month. For a moment, I pictured the boardroom again. The slide deck. The way he had dismissed 15 years of work in 10 minutes. I appreciate the offer, I said evenly. But I'll pass. Clayton didn't respond right away. Eventually, he muttered something about keeping the door open and ended the call. I set the phone down on the table before I could even stand up. It rang again. This time, the name on the screen made me smile slightly. Daniel Hartwell, CEO of Orion Supply Group, Northridge's fastest-growing competitor. When I answered, he didn't waste time. Cassidy, he said. I heard what Clayton Morrow did. Then he continued, I'd like to make you an offer. Senior Vice President, equity in the company, and complete control over client relationships. That evening, just as I finished my second call with Orion's CEO, another message appeared in my inbox. The sender's name made me pause. Alicia from HR. The subject line simply read, You should probably see this. Attached was a file titled Cost Reduction Strategy, Morrow Initiative. I opened it slowly. The first few slides looked like every other consulting presentation Clayton had been pushing since he arrived. Charts, efficiency projections, margin targets. But by slide 7, the language became more direct. Phase 1, Leadership Restructuring. My name appeared under that heading. Terminate Nolan. Eliminate relationship-dependent management structure. I felt the anger rise slowly, not explosive, but steady and controlled. I kept reading. Slide 9 outlined the financial projections after the restructuring. Increase client pricing by 18% during the next contract renewal cycle. Reduce departmental headcount by 35%. Replace senior account managers with automated service platforms and centralized support. Clayton had apparently convinced himself that loyalty to Northridge Global belonged to the brand itself. That was his first mistake. Corporate clients don't stay because of a logo. They stay because of trust. Trust built during late-night calls when shipments were delayed. Trust built when a contract problem needed solving, before a board meeting the next morning. Trust built through 15 years of showing up when things went wrong. A spreadsheet couldn't replicate that, and Clayton Morrow clearly didn't understand it. By the time I reached the final slide, the anger had cooled into something more useful. Determination. My phone was still on the table beside me. The call log from Orion open on the screen. Daniel Hartwell's offer was generous. Senior Vice President. Equity participation. Full authority over strategic accounts. But before I called him back, I needed one clarification. When Daniel answered, I spoke carefully. I'm interested, I said, but I have one condition. He waited. I bring my core team with me. Daniel didn't hesitate. Cassidy, he replied. I was hoping you'd say that. If you agree with my decision to leave and rebuild with the team who actually built the division. Leave a 1 in the comments because when you share your view, it reminds others that loyalty and respect in the workplace still matter. It started quietly. At 9:15 a.m. Keith, my senior account strategist, submitted his resignation. 30 minutes later, Janice from Client Operations did the same. By lunchtime, 3 more members of my leadership team had followed. 5 people, not random employees, the people who had actually built the Strategic Partnerships division with me. Inside Northridge, the reaction was immediate. A former colleague texted me a summary of the emergency leadership meeting that afternoon. Apparently, Clayton Morrow slammed his hand on the conference table. This is coordinated sabotage, he said. The company's legal counsel reviewed the situation within minutes. There was only one problem with Clayton's accusation. None of those employees had non-compete clauses that prevented them from resigning. They were free to leave, according to the message I received. The CFO spoke next. His voice, I was told, was calm. They're leaving because you fired the person they trusted. That explanation didn't improve Clayton's mood. By late afternoon, things became worse. 2 of Northridge's largest clients, Delta Freight and Meridian Healthcare Supply, sent official notices declining to renew their upcoming contracts. Combined value just over $120 million. By then, my phone had started buzzing again. Clayton Morrow. The first text was cautious. Cassidy, we should discuss transition support. 5 minutes later, another message arrived. Then another. By the time the evening settled in, there were 12 messages sitting unread on my screen. Each one sounded slightly more desperate than the last. The final text read, We can offer you Chief Operating Officer, full executive authority. Let's talk. I looked at the message for a moment, then I locked my phone, because at that exact moment, I was sitting in a conference room 20 floors above downtown Chicago. Across the table from me sat Daniel Hartwell and the executive leadership team at Orion Supply Group. My new team. The meeting agenda projected on the wall was simple: strategic accounts expansion, led by Cassidy Nolan. I didn't respond to Clayton. I didn't need to. The next phase had already begun. A month after leaving Northridge, the situation had evolved exactly the way I expected. I was now officially leading strategic accounts at Orion Supply Group. My office overlooked the Chicago River, but most days I barely noticed the view. We were too busy building for the first few weeks. Nothing dramatic happened. I focused on reorganizing my new team, reviewing Orion's existing client portfolio, and preparing for the moment that truly mattered: the expiration of my non-compete agreement. When that date arrived, things moved quickly. The first call came from Daniel Reeves at North Star Logistics. "We've been reviewing our options," he said carefully. "If you're handling accounts at Orion, we'd like to move our contract." The deal closed within 2 weeks. Value $120 million. The second agreement came from Delta Healthcare Supply. Their leadership team had already grown uneasy after hearing about the restructuring at Northridge. $90 million. Vector Infrastructure followed shortly after. Their board requested a direct meeting with me in person. That contract added another $140 million to Orion's portfolio. Each client made the same request during negotiations. They wanted me personally overseeing the relationship. By the end of that quarter, Orion had secured 3 major contracts that previously belonged to Northridge. The consequences inside my former company were immediate, through contacts still working there. I heard about the emergency board meeting that followed. Apparently, the financial report shocked everyone in the room. The Strategic Partnerships Division had just lost 42% of its projected annual revenue, according to the story relayed to me. Clayton Morrow lost his composure during the discussion. "Cassidy Nolan is sabotaging this company," he shouted. The legal counsel sitting across from him reportedly responded without raising his voice. "Clients are free to choose their business partners." That statement ended the argument. A week later, the market delivered its own verdict. Northridge Global's stock dropped 31% after analysts downgraded the company's revenue outlook. I read the report quietly in my office one morning before the team arrived. There was no celebration, no gloating, just confirmation of something I had understood for years. Businesses believe contracts protect relationships. In reality, relationships protect contracts. And once those relationships move, everything else begins to fall. I didn't witness the board meeting myself, but by then, enough former colleagues still trusted me to share what was happening behind those glass conference room doors. According to the financial briefing prepared for the directors, the numbers were impossible to ignore. Revenue across the Strategic Partnerships Division had fallen by $180 million since my departure. The forecast for the upcoming fiscal year showed something Northridge hadn't experienced in over a decade: their first annual loss in 11 years. The room, I was told, went completely quiet when the CFO finished his presentation. Clayton Morrow apparently tried to regain control of the narrative. This situation was caused by client sabotage. He argued, "Competitors are clearly interfering with our relationships." That explanation didn't survive long. The company's legal counsel calmly responded from across the table. "They're leaving voluntarily," she said. "There's no evidence of solicitation or contractual violations." Another silence followed. When the meeting ended, Clayton walked out of the boardroom and within an hour sent me what would become his final message: an email. The subject line simply read, "Let's resolve this." Inside the message, the tone was dramatically different from the man who had fired me in 10 minutes. "Cassidy," he wrote, "we underestimated the operational impact of your departure. The board is prepared to discuss any arrangement necessary to restore stability." Then came the line that almost made me laugh. "Name your price. We'll make you CEO." I read the message twice, not because I was tempted, but because the irony was impossible to miss. 2 months earlier, Clayton had declared my role unnecessary. Now he was offering the entire company. I closed the email without replying. There was nothing left to discuss. 2 weeks later, the news became public. The Northridge board had accepted Clayton Morrow's resignation. Effective immediately, Official statements cited strategic leadership changes, but the analysts covering the company were far more direct. Leadership failure, market miscalculation, loss of critical client relationships. I finished reading the report in silence. Justice. I've learned, rarely arrives loudly. Sometimes it simply unfolds, one predictable consequence at a time. A few weeks after Clayton Morrow's resignation became public, my phone rang again with a number I didn't recognize. By then, Orion's Strategic Accounts Division was fully operational under my leadership, and the pace of work had barely slowed since the client transitions began. Still, something about that call felt different. When I answered, the voice on the other end introduced herself calmly. Cassidy, this is Eleanor Barnes, chair of the Northridge Board. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, she continued, we made a mistake. There was no defensiveness in her tone, just the quiet weight of someone acknowledging a decision that had already cost the company dearly. We underestimated what you built, she said, and we underestimated how quickly those relationships would move without you. Then she explained the reason for the call. The board wanted to bring me back, not as a consultant, not as a division head, as CEO. They were offering a full executive contract, an equity stake in the company, and complete authority to rebuild Northridge's strategic direction. For a second, I leaned back in my chair and let the silence settle. 2 months earlier, I had been dismissed in 10 minutes because my role was supposedly unnecessary. Now they were offering the entire company. I couldn't help smiling. Too late, I said gently. On the other end of the line, Eleanor didn't argue. I think she already knew that answer before she called. By that point, Orion's expansion was moving faster than anyone predicted. Our Strategic Accounts Division had closed its first fiscal year projections early, $310 million in new revenue. More importantly, the clients were stable. The team I had brought with me was thriving. We were building something that actually respected the relationships behind the numbers. A week later, the next headline appeared. Orion Supply Group had reached an agreement to acquire Northridge's former Strategic Partnerships division. The price was far lower than the division had once been worth. When Daniel Hartwell showed me the press release, I read it quietly. The company I built had come back to me, just under a different name, 1 year later. I stood across the street from the same glass building where Clayton Morrow had ended my career in 10 minutes, except the logo above the entrance had changed. Orion Supply Group. Our team had moved back into the office after Orion acquired the old Strategic Partnerships division. Many of the same employees had returned. So had the clients. The numbers told the rest of the story. The division now generated $420 million in annual revenue, with 97% client retention, relationships rebuilt, trust restored. As for Clayton Morrow, the last article I saw mentioned he was working as an independent consultant somewhere on the West Coast. I didn't feel anger when I read that. Back in my office, I placed the old client trophy from North Star Logistics on the shelf beside new photos of our team. I never needed revenge. I just needed to build something better. Because in business, there's a simple rule. You can fire a person, but you can't fire a client's trust. There's something I learned through all of this that no spreadsheet can measure. Work, titles, even companies can disappear overnight. But the way you treat people tends to stay with them much longer. The relationships we build, the trust we earn, and the quiet moments when we choose integrity over ego, those things travel further than any contract ever will. I sometimes wonder what each of you would do in a moment like that. When years of effort are dismissed in minutes, would you walk away quietly, rebuild, or fight to prove your value somewhere new? I'd love to know where you're listening from today. And if this story meant something to you, consider subscribing or leaving a comment. A simple like or share from you might carry this message to someone else who needs encouragement right now. In that way, you're not just watching, you're helping a story of resilience reach the people who need it most. This story was fully created and produced by our team. We do not copy or borrow content from any other channel. Thank you for staying with us and listening until the end.